Are you sorry? Are you heartfully sorry for all of your sins? It does not matter, for now is the time for your just punishments. Hello, I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser. And with me, as always, is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Hey, Maz, always glad to have you to talk about punishment. Specifically, the Punisher in Two Dead Men. Or The Punisher in Two Dead Men. A rollicking comedy from director Tom Shankland. Writers, of course, are, to give you all the comic book writers first, Jerry Conway and John Romita Sr. and Ross Andrew. And then we get down here to created by, which is Steve Lightfoot, written by Steve Lightfoot, story editor, no, it's not the hardest working person in show business this week, Angela Lamanna. She is the story editor, but the hardest working person in show business this week is Ken Christensen, our staff writer. Okay. Two Dead Men. A mysterious phone call forces Frank's hand. Meanwhile, Madani goes digging for suspects, and Curtis delivers a message. Okay. So this is a nice one. We open up with a flashback on the Staten Island ferry, where all delightful Staten Islanders have happy memories of Frank and his little boy, who is kind of a jerk. I think we can all agree
he's trying his best, and I'm sure he's, distressed with his father not being around and read stuff in the news that he probably shouldn't,
Yeah, he's probably got bad influences back at home. It's, from like your friends and neighbors. And you don't know any better when you're a kid, when you got like idiot neighbors who are just idiots, and you need a dad like Frank Castle to set you straight. Don't be an idiot.
Yeah.
Sorry, Frank Jr., don't be an idiot.
What I did love about this scene was there's like a shadowy figure in the hoodie watching them, and they point it out, and it seems like, oh my God, who's watching them? But then, what a wonderful way to present a flashback. I haven't seen somebody else do that before, where the guy in the hoodie ends up being him, and he's watching, a memory. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, honestly, it's really great. You know what it actually kind of reminds me of, interestingly enough? Remember the Incredible Hulk episode, The Veteran, with the young man?
Which one was that?
That was the one, he wasn't a veteran, but his brother died in Vietnam, and he keeps on having these nightmares that we assume are supposed to be some kind of flashback, but then we realize they're just his memories of these things. And it just a thing that kind of struck me. It's like, oh yeah, we have that idea of, and really, this one, and then I think we had one last week where, the guy in the mask comes in and kills everyone in his house.
Yeah.
And it kind of strikes me that it was interesting that it just reminded me of how, these flashbacks can sometimes merge with reality, and him seeing one thing, remembering something, and it was a great. I mean, this was a great way to present it. But just something that I was thinking about that it reminded me. From those of you who haven't listened to the Gamma Cast, go look it up. Me and Maz did some of our great work there early in our careers. Led to our great partnership here on Netflix. But yeah, so we get this flashback to him and his kids, and it is very sad, because of course it is all about his loss, and I like the fact that he doesn't have an idealized memory of his kids, which I thought was interesting. That he is remembering his son being a brat, his son being Frank Jr. not being the man he wants him to be, and I think that's also an interesting point to make in this, is this idea that, that of course, I'm sure is the kind of thing that's Frank Castle's greatest fear when he was alive, that because he's not around enough, he can't raise his son to be the kind of man he wants his son to be.
Right.
And now...
And he seems to be, like, so racked with guilt. It seems like that's, like, a medal of honor or like a cross that he has to bear, that guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So I think his mind would always go towards the things where he feels he didn't live up to his expectations.
Exactly. And that was weird.
That was weird.
Oh, okay. I got a little Okay. But yeah, so in this moment we have Frank regretting his past. He's on the ferry, and I think we go from here. Do we go from here to Mondi, or do we go from?
He walks into the diner.
Oh, that's where we go to the diner, and he gets the call.
Yeah.
That was pretty interesting. Because we do get that he's being watched. He's being essentially stalked by Chip, and it's interesting because this relationship with Chip is when he it's a weird continuity question in this, because when he finds the Chip CD or DVD in the first in the Daredevil series, it seems like he knew it was there and he had hidden it. In this one, we get this idea that no, he found it there. It was hidden there by Chip to give him this, to get his attention.
So refresh my memory. Where did he run into the disc? He ran into it when he was killing Schoonover?
No, he went back to his house after he killed the general.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes into his house. I think he burns his house down after that, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Didn't he? I remember him burning his house down, but that could just be a false memory, just like Frank Castle's false memories. But he goes into the house and he breaks apart an old picture of him and his family, and behind it is the DVD that says Chip, and you get this idea. Oh, that was something he had hidden there. But here we see that no, or at least, and I wonder if that was a retcon that they decided that no, he didn't know about it, or that they decided to let him find it. Was it always supposed to be that he just found it there, and we just didn't see any kind of detective work on his part when he finds it? Because it seemed very deliberate when he got it in Daredevil. But here it's much more. It's made clear that he didn't dig it out. It was discovered. It was hidden from him. It was placed there for him to find in a very hard to find spot.
I mean, maybe you could sort of view it this way that, because they say Chip was ousted from the government for, releasing secrets and whatnot. That could have been one of the things that he was trying to do. And Schoonover, because he was involved with it, got his hands on it and pulled it away from the prying eyes of the media and the government before it could get to somewhere. And he had hidden it there to keep it safe or something.
Yeah.
But Chip being Chip, as it's found, maybe he gets an alert saying, oh, somebody messed with that disc. It's out there again or something.
Yeah. Well,
maybe.
I mean, from Chip's dialogue, he says that, oh, you found it. And on that disc, we see what it is, which is Frank, which I believe is Frank Castle, one of the guys in there. Or no, we don't see.
I believe
so. Have masks.
Right, but here's the interesting thing. Right before he wakes up from this little, again, you have the same flashback where his wife is kissing him, good morning, and then a dude walks in and shoots her. Now, for some reason, I paused the screen to go back and look at something, and in that moment, you could see that it's Frank in that mask.
Yes, which is why I assume the guy in the video is Frank as well.
Exactly. Yeah, because they were wearing the same outfits as he was in that flashback.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and that's the point where I say it reminds me of the Veteran and the fact that that's not how his wife dies, but he feels he killed his wife. In a way, what you're sort of getting is this idea here, if we're going to read into it, is he did some stuff in Afghanistan for the general.
Right.
And we later see that Wolf is a part of this, that, he was not proud of. that he did things because he was ordered to, and he didn't question his orders. And he feels, because he knows when he realizes what he did was wrong, he feels that maybe his family was killed, that was his punishment from God, that he was the one being punished.
Mm-hmm.
And that, at least this is my interpretation of it. And if nothing else, that informs his actions here. It informs a lot of what he does, because he's trying to balance his scales. He sees he killed innocent people, and that's why his family was killed. And now he has to maybe make up for that by killing guilty people. But he has to focus on the real criminals, perhaps. It's still early in the show. We really aren't watching ahead very much, and so we don't know yet.
Certainly I'm not. So
yes. So in this moment, we have Frank gets the call from Chip. He goes to figure out where Chip is, and
they're calling him Micro in the series here, aren't they?
I'm sorry?
They're calling him Micro instead of Chip.
Oh, they're calling him Micro. I'm sorry. You know what? You're right. Chip. They call him Micro, and I'm calling him Chip because I just don't remember correctly. I have bad memories. I'm not a clever man, is what I'm saying. Yeah, they're calling him Micro. Yes, you are correct. His name is Micro, not Chip. And he is sort of meant to be in this kind of a Snowden kind of character in this story, where he is a guy who released a bunch of information, and that's what got him killed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually I see here on that interview, yes, his name is David Lieberman / Micro.
Right.
So
what did you think? Like when Frank gets to the top of the rooftop, where he assumes, whoever's calling him would be, he finds a cell phone and a mirror and a flashlight pointed towards the mirror or towards. Is that just so? He's on the opposite roof waiting for the light not to be reflected back to know that somebody messed with it so he can look and see Frank? Or do you think there was a significance to that? Because they really sort of pointed to it like you're supposed to see something out of that.
Yeah, I think you're right in that. I think that was how he was meant to see him, or it was meant to give Frank, like the reflection was meant to draw Frank's attention, possibly. So it was either to make him think that someone was active there, that there was movement, or it was meant that, when the guy sees the light has been broken, he knows that Frank is on the other roof.
Or maybe that's what led him to that rooftop to begin with, because I just kept thinking, why would he just be so dead set and have his gun out, like he knew that was the rooftop the guy would be at.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what tipped him off to run to there. That makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, it was something like that. And we were kind of talking half this podcast about the first 5 minutes of the show. So
it was such a good episode, and I hope the show continues staying this strong. But I remember, watching it going, oh my God, so much has happened. I hit the pause button. It was only 20 minutes. I was like, oh yes,
No, it is a good. This is a really solid series so far, and up to episode 2, it has been really strong. I don't think there's any arguments on that. One thing I do want to make mention of is, of course, we get our return of Karen Page.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I do like Karen Page. In many ways, I kind of prefer Karen Page as a central character to this series more than Night
Claire
Nurse.
Temple.
Yeah, Claire Temple. I know they are pushing Claire Temple, and I like Claire Temple. Don't get me wrong. But I guess I think that Karen Page has a bit more of an organic relationship with the heroes, in that she is a reporter.
Right.
I don't
know if you caught it, but again, I was pausing for some other reason or rewinding, and I noticed that the article that he was reading in the diner was written by Karen. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't notice that. Yeah, well, it makes sense, And she
he keeps tabs on what she's doing.
Yeah, he reconnects with Karen and makes, so she now knows he's alive again. And I like how she, he does his little Matches Malone bit here. Batman, when Batman goes and, goes undercover as a homeless person all the time, And and I love when heroes do that. Captain America does that from time to time too, though Captain America is not very good at it. Yes, very nice. And but yeah, so Karen walks up without even knowing him, and she's still being a generous sport, which is nice.
Mm.
And reconnects, and we get and Frank connects with Karen, and Karen goes back to the editor, and the editor makes the point about the the story that was killed from up
Right.
above because it would have interfered with an ongoing investigation that never got investigated, as it turns out.
Right. Right.
And
I don't think he didn't really believe that it would interfere with the investigation. I think he knew that he was being asked to curtail the story, and he went along with it. Mm-hmm. And he justified it to himself by thinking, hey, you know what, maybe I'm building a relationship with somebody important that can feed me news later. But my favorite part about this was, and I love the relationship between the editor and Karen, because, I mean, he's the editor. Who's going to tell him anything? But the disapproval in her eyes was so hurtful to him. He couldn't deal with it. And he was like, okay, fine, here's the article. Just don't look at me that way.
Yeah.
For someone as grizzled in an industry and at the top of it, you kind of forget why you're there sometimes. And a young person, or at least young in the industry, coming in and having that ideal not messed with yet, and having those eyes reflect who you are is a powerful thing for him. And I really love that.
Mm-hmm. And of course, this. I'm trying to remember exactly where it goes to, because we do get two separate items here. One is, and I'm trying to think. He goes to Micro's house first.
Right. Well, I mean, before we get there, we get sort of a little bit of clarity on what's happening on Micro CD, because Dina and Sam are talking as they're walking, presumably by World Trade. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it became apparent to me that the person that was shot in that video, possibly by Frank, was Mozz Zubair, the guy that's the cause of all the problems for Dina, or Dina's former partner.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, this ties into the whole Afghan drug line, in the sense that, of course, Zubair was the one who was trying to say there are, it's these military people who are bringing it down, and he gets silenced because of it. But in the end, this is the Punisher's old crew.
Right.
And that was actually the one thing that was kind of weird to me, is the timeline on it. Because I wasn't, and of course I don't know when Zubair was actually killed.
Right. Right.
But it seemed to me like Zubair was probably killed more recently.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so I was like, well, because that's the thing, is it's kind of this ambiguous timeline as to when Frank got back from Afghanistan. And I guess on some level, what I might have thought in this, and I think this is why I think that the actual death of Zubair is kind of a misdirect with regard to Frank.
Ooh, interesting.
I think that yes, Zubair was killed by the same group, but I think it was after Frank already came home, and I think that the murder of Zubair was just another guy in the same unit after Frank had rotated out. And it's
maybe it was Russo.
Possibly, yeah. The idea is that it's not that Frank killed Zubair, it's that Frank killed many other people just like Zubair.
Right.
And I think that so this is just, I have no idea that this is true, but I think that might be the reveal we get later, is that Frank didn't kill Zubair, but that Zubair was just one of a dozen other people who got killed. And this is this thing, because this is this thing that I think is kind of an important point in the Punisher mythos. I think it's an important point in the Batman mythos for me. is whether or not the death that inspires their crusade is random or directed. So if the killer of Batman's parents or the killer of the Punisher's family is just a random street crime, then it makes sense that he is the Punisher or Batman fighting this amorphous idea of crime. Whereas if it is a conspiracy that it was actually people were trying to kill him and his family because of what he knew, or in Batman's case with Ra's al Ghul in the Dark Knight Rises story, because of who the Waynes were, I think it takes away from what the real interesting idea of Batman or the Punisher is. This is my opinion.
Right, I agree. I agree. I agree.
And I always thought that was like the biggest problem for me with all of the Punisher movies we had, except for the last one, which had other problems. Was that, to me, they always wanted to say the Punisher's family was killed because he was a great cop, or because he was going after someone powerful, and that person powerful came after Frank and his family.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It does seem like they're changing up the script, because the whole time in the Daredevil series, it was just that they happened to be there and that the drug deal went wrong or something, but it didn't point to anything as big as this, you know?
Yes. But what I think...
And I hear they're changing it up a little bit.
Well, that's the question. Are they changing it up, or is it meant to be a misdirect? Like Abu Zabir. Is it meant to be that, no, he is actually going to be revealed to be that, yes, it was all this grand conspiracy, or that it's just, no, it really was just this random thing, and he just happened to get caught in the crossfire.
Right.
But, it'll give you this moment where you think, oh, it is a grand conspiracy, and then it's like, no, God doesn't work that way. There is no great conspiracy trying to bring down you, Frank Castle. You just were in the wrong place at the wrong time. That you're not being punished because of Abu Zabir. You did a lot of other horrible things too that you're not being sad about. You need to understand that, these things happen because people are evil, and there's a lot of evil in the world. And maybe that's what you need to focus on, is that there's evil in the world. Not just evil you caused, but the evil that was caused by other people. Although one evil person has his clock punched in this episode.
Well, I mean, you mean Micro, right?
No, I mean Carson Wolf.
Oh, Ellison, the boss.
Oh, is that his Ellison? Oh, Ellison. No, not Ellison. Ellison is Jeffrey
Dina's boss.
Yeah. His name is Carson Wolf, isn't it? Thomas C. Howell?
I don't know. It's funny because she called him Ellison at one point, and that's what I assumed his name was. But then he mentions that he killed, what was it, Carlson?
Yeah. The guy who's the head of the agency that...
right. I must have misinterpreted something.
Madani worked for, yeah. I'm looking at the pictures here, and it looks like... I mean, from the picture, the guy who looks most like the guy who got shot is C. Thomas Howell, the actor. Let me see who Carson Wolf is. IMDb, Carson Wolf, Two Dead Men. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of, is Carson Wolf. Yeah, because he's the guy who's strapped to the chair with the Punisher.
Boss is Carson Wolf?
Yeah, Carson Wolf is the head of the agency.
Okay, so he's the one that killed the story with the editor. And
we make the point that, you don't afford a house like that on a civil servant's salary.
Yeah.
That classic point to be made. You don't afford that in the job you have. Just like that's how you know Crawford and Tubbs were on the take.
Yeah, and it's funny when they get to him coming into his house, like the wide shots that they were taking, of him from the outside. It just really screamed like this dude was about to die.
Yeah, well, and you also got Sinatra playing "Ain't That a Kick in the Head," so Although you get a great thing with Carson Wolf, where you realize this is not a man to be taken lightly.
No, he's quite formidable. I mean, this is the
Yeah, he
Punisher.
holds his own against the
Yeah,
Punisher. You know,
yeah, man.
in fact, you kind of get the feeling that if Frank Castle had run into Carson Wolf when he was on the beat, this might have gone a completely different way.
Yeah.
But it goes the way it does. And this is,
Yeah.
and this
I,
was,
I,
yeah,
I love the statement they make there, too, the fact that torture doesn't work and yada, 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 and how easily he's able to manipulate him into, getting the truth not by taking his power away, but getting the truth out of him by giving him a false sense of power. It's a very interesting point to make.
yes. Well, but that is actually, I mean, that is actual interrogation. That was actually the biggest thing about torture was that, the best way you actually get, it's not the bad cop who gets the information. It's actually the good cop.
Right.
It's the cop who is kind of, the cop who makes you think he's a fellow traveler.
Right.
I never forget that there was a great episode of SVU where Maloney's character, they're talking to the pedophile, and Maloney starts like acting like he's a pedophile too. He's like, "Oh yeah, man, I get it. These kids today, they look like they're this. I get it. There's grass on the field, play ball, And it's like, yeah, and it's like, you're stupid that you're gonna go. But that's how you actually get a confession: is you get a guy to feel like he can be honest or to be safe, and that's or another great scene where that happens is of course in the Avengers when Natasha Romanoff tricks Loki into revealing his plan. If you remember that, and it was a while ago, the Avengers. Okay, anyway, so Carson Wolf does get taken out. We definitely get this implication that this is part of a grand conspiracy, which I do think is a misdirect, but we're going to find that out in future episodes. We have Frank basically coming to deal with Micro, and basically making the point to Micro that he's found him out. He goes to Micro's family's house, and makes the point that I'm here with your family now.
Right. Which made me wonder where Micro is hiding. It has to be within like a couple of blocks from his family's house. As he rushes there, Frank's still there, and then when he sees like, okay, I don't think Frank is trying to hurt my family, he goes back, and before Frank has a chance to do anything and leave, he's already back in his lair.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder where he's holed up.
Yeah, probably like down the street, I mean, close enough that he's got live feeds of it,
That's true. Yeah, that's the other thing. Do you think, like, these were security measures that an NSA analyst would already have in his home prior, or do you think he snuck in there at some point and put cameras everywhere?
Well,
what do you think?
I think with Micro, he's probably a paranoid. So he probably had bugged his own house.
Right.
Long before he got in trouble, just because because basically there's no better way to check for bugs than to know what bugs are already there.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was leaning towards also.
Yeah. So and that is sort of what I think was there. And anyway, where was I? Because I'll be honest, I don't remember how this episode ends.
Well, it ends with the confrontation between Frank and Micro, and how Micro gets sort of played pretty hard by Frank here.
Yeah. Well, because Micro is kind of out of his league with it. Micro is smart.
He's so, his emotional state isn't at rest. He's panicked, and all his energy is flying in 30 different directions because he gets him panicked by showing up at his house, and then when he calls him, he takes a SIM card out, so he's sitting out there not able to reach him, not able to communicate, and he's freaking out.
Yeah.
And he's off his game, and he's been found out, and then Frank, of course, is a lot smarter than he is in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So he's and inadvertently leads him right back to his lair, which is a silly thing for him to do.
Now, when does Like, when does the confrontation in the graveyard occur? Is that just before this?
Well, after Micro sees that Frank doesn't have any intentions of hurting his family, he leaves and goes back to his lair. And then we get the scene, with Dina asking her boss for permission to get trained as a ruse to get next to Billy Russo. And so then Frank is sitting at the diner where he was spotted by Micro earlier and leaves the phone on the table, just letting Micro know that he wants to talk. And Micro's obviously watching from camera feeds, and he calls him there. And then Frank lets him know, hey, listen, man, I can get you anytime I want to. I know your secrets. I'm in control. Meet me here. And so then he tells him to meet him at one location, calls him, tells him to meet him at another location, and then they have the run around where Kurt, which I thought was really cool, is watching him the whole time. And that's how they end up at and I'm assuming he had Micro show up to his own grave, right?
Yes. He had to meet him at Frank Castle's grave, yeah. Well,
No. I thought it was Micro, David Lieberman's grave.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes, David Lieberman. Yeah, okay.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, it goes to David Lieberman's grave. I forget whose grave it was, but yeah, it was a grave, and
right, it said Hebrew lettering on it, so I figured it was probably his.
Yeah, that makes sense. And basically, he says he's not interested in working with him.
Right. Which again,
yeah,
in a misdirection by Frank.
Yes, well, like I said, I think that there's going to be a lot of misdirection in this series.
Yeah.
I think maybe that we're going to be led down a primrose path, and then I think it's going to have it pulled out from under us at the end. Because, like I said, I think that to me, the raison d'être of the Punisher has to be the randomness of the crime. That it's not about you, Frank. It's about the fact that the world needs punishment.
Yeah.
That's my.
What's interesting, I think what turned Frank around on Micro was meeting his wife, because he didn't know what to make of him at first, and then I think part of the reason he showed up there was to send a message to Micro, but also to try to get a sense for who he was or what kind of person he was. And when he speaks to his wife, he sort of gets a sense that, okay, this isn't like a totally bad guy. It's a guy in a bad spot who's a good guy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. In a way, sort of, it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from his own life. His family has to deal with his loss.
Yeah.
And he sort of sees a little bit of his own life in that situation.
Yes. Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about this episode before we go into the third one next week? Yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing is the character of Billy Russo, and I think that was a very interesting conversation between Dina and him.
Yes.
And how sort of he laid out, as you can't afford to question your orders. That's how you get killed. Yeah. So it's a very powerful statement to make for two reasons. One, obviously, because it sort of gives you an insight into why Frank maybe did the things he did. But then on the other side of it, is he creating justifications for his own actions? And was he the one that killed Ahmad?
Yes. And I think that is the truth of it. One of the things I kind of liked about this with Billy Russo is him and Madani kind of, doing the flirtation, especially with the attempts to get everyone drunk, and then Billy really walking away from it, not just to show he's not not as creepy as you might think, that he's not going to take it. Although one can make the point that by not taking advantage of the situation, he actually sets up a better situation later. But anyway. Yeah, I did. I mean, I really like the Billy Russo character. He is, of course, a known quantity within the Punisher universe. His character has been very heavily reimagined here.
Oh, what was he like in the comics?
Oh, you want me to spoil it for you?
Oh, no. Okay, then no.
Yeah. Well, so basically, here's what I'm going to tell you. He's a much nicer guy that we've seen so far here than he is in the comics. In the comics, his character starts out as a as a mafia guy,
Hmm.
and he's not the kind of smart, brilliant guy that he is here. You know, yeah, I forget what they. Yeah, but his handsomeness is very much a selling point for his character, because he is meant to be just so beautiful. All the ladies love him. And that, of course, informs where he winds up at the end of the series. But I don't want to spoil that. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, that and the other thing that I thought was interesting was when Dina is sort of pitching her game to Billy, you see that Carson is watching, and he doesn't seem, in that moment, you figure out that he's not as oblivious as he seems. Because when she first brings up the idea to him, he's like, hey, that's a good idea. Go for it. And you're thinking, oh, he's just a dumb boss. And he's just like a middle management kind of guy. But in that moment, you're like, his spidey senses would think for something. He's pretty astute. He's not a dumb guy. He knew what was up.
Well, of course, because you don't get to be in his position if you're a dumb guy. You know?
Right.
This is not a world of incompetent bureaucrats. That's one thing you can say about this universe, is that the bureaucrats are, if anything, hyper competent. Much to the and that, of course, is why they're the most dangerous of all. You know, nothing's more dangerous than a hyper competent bureaucrat, because they know what to do and how to get away with it.
Right.
You know, it's like Wilson Fisk. You know.
Yeah.
Above reproach is the idea. If you are the most beloved, what's the word I'm looking for? Benefactor in the city, no one assumes that your money comes from corrupt means. You're just in the import-export business, as far as anyone knows. You know, and nice old Billy Russo. He's just a man who's using his military training to train police officers and other folks to be the best they can be. There's nothing to be afraid of here.
Right.
Yes.
I also loved how salesy his character was. Every moment he got, hey, come in, let me build a specific plan just for you guys. I can do great things for you. You know, I thought that was pretty cool.
He's a charmer. That's his thing. That's who Billy Russo is. He is a charmer. He is everything you could love, and and that's who Billy Russo is. And I love his character. I really am interested to see where it goes. I'm really interested to see where it goes in future series too. Where it goes into future episodes and maybe even into the next season if he makes it that far. I would love to see him in the next season. After what happens in this season. So I think that's going to be interesting to see the Billy Russo character evolve and change. But we're going to have to see. Okay, Mozz, any final thoughts on tonight's episode?
No, I think we covered all of it. I'm just super excited about this series and how well written it is, how polished every little new piece of information is presented to us. I'm really, really digging it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great series. I've only heard good things about it. Like every Netflix series, they always say, "Oh, it drags on this episode or that." But I think I'm excited for it, and I can't wait to see how it goes. So, Mozz, how can folks find you if they'd like to talk to you about the Punisher and punishments they'd like to inflict or receive?
They can reach me via email or on Facebook. It's mozzmanzor@gmail.com. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
And, of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way the way Mozz and Pals once did at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, follow me on the Twitters as I live Creations of S.H.I.E.L.D. Friday nights at 9, and other things as I so feel free and fit. @Charlie Esser, that's CHARLIE. SSER, listen to 2 E's in the middle for quality. Ladies and gentlemen, you have received your just punishment. You may go forth and sin no more, or sin more and return for more punishment. Good night, everybody.